Hey, what's up, YouTube? Goratha here. So today I'll talk about Glacial Hammer. Now, I've been asked a lot of questions on whether or not I'm going to be updating my Juggernaut Glacial Hammer character. To be honest, I didn't really have any plans myself to play Glacial Hammer, but I've been asked so many questions about it, I figured I'd make a video talking about what I would do if I was going to play it. And yeah, let's get into it. So you guys can see, we're not playing a Juggernaut anymore, we're playing a Slayer. Now, Juggernaut is completely fine, but I think it's a crime not to league start Slayer after all the changes. We can talk about some of the reasons. So, Masterful Form. This is a node that gives you endurance charges based on your maximum frenzy charges. And the whole idea is we scale max frenzy charges, and then we get some endurance charges later on through that. Now, the reason I really like this for this build specifically is we get really easy access to generating charges. Let me quickly explain that. So we're playing a Trauma Glacial Hammer character, and we have Inexorable. So every time we attack, we have a 25% chance to gain an endurance charge. Basically, you're self-hitting yourself and getting endurance charges very easily that way. And then we take the Charge Mastery node, which makes them last super long. And then for Frenzy charges, we're using Poacher's Mark, which gives Frenzy charge on hit, along with the Mark Mastery, slash Blood Magic, slash Blood Rage, so we always have frenzy charges as well. Now, this is actually a pretty good way to scale your character nowadays. Slayer is going to be very, very meta next league, I think. But more for like a second or third character. I think this is a very easy way to league start Slayer, though, and actually get away with it. Most people are going to be going in Ray Lakesh super endgame and using some Maven belt shenanigans. We are doing that in this PoB, but the difference is we don't need Ray Lakesh to actually have charges. The damage is actually pretty high, even without Ray Lakesh, as you can see here. And even with a Frost Breath, the damage is quite high. Frost Breath will be pretty much the weapon you're using until probably super endgame, honestly. It's pretty hard to beat this weapon. You basically need like a really fast scepter with like hatred effect and some pen and stuff like that. Most of our damage is scaled through trauma, so the faster the weapon, the better. Quickly show you guys the damage with trauma and without trauma. It's pretty significant. This is assuming like 30 or 40 sacks, I believe. And with Frost Breath, I think it's even less than that. Let me see here. 25? Yeah, it's like 25 sacks. You should easily reach that amount with frenzy charges. And that's the general idea around the build. Now, early on for leveling, I would recommend you level a Sunder. Again, like most melee characters, Sunder is going to be the best way to level. Make sure you grab this Mana Mastery if you're having mana issues early on. We'll also need a Mana Mastery endgame because you're not running Blood Magic. You can switch to Glacial Hammer as soon as you get Tribal Fury, which is Melee Splash, and the additional Strike Mastery. Thunder might be better to play, but you can switch pretty early actually to Glacial Hammer. This is level 32. I actually would be okay switching at this point. This is when you also get your normal lab, which is very strong for strike skills especially. This gives you a bunch of accuracy, which will help us a lot when we go precise technique. And it gives a lot of AoE and melee strike range. Now, the AoE is actually scaled on Glacial Hammer. You might be asking, how are we scaling AoE with Glacial Hammer? It doesn't have the AoE tag. But if you're not aware, if you take Melee Splash, it becomes an AoE skill, basically. And it scales up AoE. So once you have Tribal Fury and Impact, you can switch to Glacial Hammer pretty easily. Now, Trauma is a different story. I wouldn't switch to one-hand Trauma until probably Merc Lab. You want a couple things before you switch to Trauma. Notably, you want Inexorable for the endurance charges, and you want some Overleech. Overleech is how we're actually sustaining Trauma as a Slayer, and yeah, basically for Trauma to work, you need good Fizz hit mitigation, as well as good recovery. That means we want some Overleech and armor slash endurance charges. That's kind of the general idea around the build, and super endgame, you might be able to get away with going with two-hander. I know I talk about too much here, but there is a new enchant for two-hand maces that gives 50% physical as a random element. I have a feeling that one-hander will still be the best way to scale this, though. Like, one-hand trauma is probably still the way to go. But that is an option, though. Maybe worth checking out during the league. So super endgame, you can actually run clusters. And you can drop Fortified Gem for Overlord. I put a gem set here, and there's like without cluster and with cluster. Pretty much the only difference here is without the cluster, you want the Fortified Gem. The thing is, this is a really, really rare mod, so getting Overlord with two other really good mods is going to be pretty hard to do. This is like probably not a day one thing. This is probably like a couple days in. It's going to be pretty hard to roll this. There's not really any way to target farm or target roll Overlord other than like alt spamming it or something. It's going to be pretty rough to roll that. But this is definitely what you want to go for eventually. We are taking a couple rage notes on the tree. I don't really know if we need more rage gain than this right here. You might want to take a look at more rage generation. We are right next to Veteran's Wrath as well. This could be required to take. I'm just not sure how it's going to feel yet. You are attacking super fast though, so rage might be okay. I just don't know, honestly. But you might want to take another rage cluster later. And we're also taking the maximum toll recovery from Leech. This is very important for Slayer. This is how we get more over Leech. Pretty important. The Leech Mastery is also pretty insane for trauma. I think you take the recoup one, actually. Because if you run into a cannot leech mob, you might just die instantly. But if you have this Leech Mastery, you'll recoup a lot of damage. 25% is a lot. You're going to be recouping 25% damage taken. So pretty insane mastery, honestly. Definitely worth taking. Okay, let's talk about the gear. So you're pretty much using Frost Ruff most of the time. Super endgame. I could see you getting away with a super fast weapon with Hatred effect and stuff like that on it. But yeah, majority of the time it's probably gonna be Frost Breath. Now the attack speed is pretty low on this, but we're scaling friendly charges, so it should be fine. You do want to go for corrupted Frost Breath with attack speed though, ideally. The other notable item is Heat Shiver. Now Heat Shiver got a pretty big nerf, but it's still worth using for this character. You do gain a lot of damage. You're pretty much freezing bosses, or being counted as being frozen, and you're getting a lot of chill effect. So Heat Shiver is pretty big damage increase. Now, we're not using Trinity in this PoB, but you might be able to make Trinity work eventually. I didn't really think it would work right away, so I didn't put it into PoB. Worth taking a look at later, though, potentially. Yeah, other than that, there's not really any unique items. Pretty much just suppression, life, and res on gear. You do want to keep an eye out for phys damage reduction on shield and chest. This will make it so you take less damage from trauma. You do eventually want to be getting a lot of armor, though, like maybe even taking iron reflexes. This is probably worth clicking. I didn't click it because we don't have any block. The evasion's pretty strong for mapping. But you might not need any evasion when you're playing Slayer because you have so much recovery, so it might just be worth clicking iron reflexes. Slayers like to use Writhing Jar because it gives you overleach when you kill the worms, and as well as giving you more damage if you kill recently. These are two main reasons you take the Writhing Jar. Now for more min-max gear, we're looking at Yoke of Suffering. Yoke of Suffering is very insane for this character. Quite a bit of damage. Definitely best in slot, I think, for damage. It gives you the shock. I don't think PoB is really calculating shock properly here. It's not really increasing the damage very much. I'm not quite sure what's going on with that. I'm assuming you're gonna get like 25% shock or something. Like 25-30 shocks in most bosses. So it's a little higher than it's showing right here. Depending on your trauma stacks though, so it's kind of a bit weird. Taming is also an option. I didn't really put it in PoB, but taming's pretty decent as well. You have to make sure you get enough accuracy on your gear though to make precise technique work. It is pretty easy with impact, but something you still have to keep an eye out on. And precision will help with that too. Now for mana cost, I think you can get away with just taking the 1 mana cost node, but maybe you have to take like a life mastery as well. Not quite sure how the mana is going to be, but this is something I would look into if you actually have a lot of mana issues. Quite a few ways on the tree to get some reduced mana costs. For this character specifically, I don't think it's worth running Blood Magic. You do want Determination for more armor, and you do want Hatred. Hatred's a lot of damage for this character. So I wouldn't really drop either one of those. For the super min-max gear, there's an option to go Arn's Anguish. This will make it so you get brutal charges instead of endurance charges. This is a lot of damage for the endgame setup. However, you have to run Red Lakesh, otherwise you lose your endurance charges. With Red Lakesh, you actually get your maximum endurance and frenzy on top of the belt charges. That's why you'd want to run that. And of course, some synthesized ring eventually for +1 charge would be really good. And yeah, Warlord gloves are also pretty easy early on to get +1 charge. Yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. I think this will be a very solid league starter. If you like playing strike skills, keep in mind you are playing probably one of the most melee builds This is the very, very melee build. You're literally in melee range attacking. So if you like that playstyle, this is a very solid starter. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and this is what I would do if I was playing Glacial Hammer. I think it'll be good, and yep, I'll see you guys next time.